What I do when I study a surah is I recite that surah over and over again for at least a few days. Just recite that surah. So if he talks about something, I want to know more about it. I want to go inside that world and take a deep look at what is it that Allah referred to.
Assalamu alaikum. I have a quick question. Thank you first. And I wonder how you study the surahs. Do you have tips for us? Like when we want to study a surah,
Cool.
Do you have a fixed plan which you use for every surah? Or yeah, that's it. Thank you.
It's complicated. I don't think you guys can follow my plan yet, but I want to be able to get you to the point where you can follow my plan. I'll tell you briefly my plan, and then I'll tell you what I want to be your plan. My plan was to tell you your plan on day 7. Okay? So I'll tell you my plan today. I'll tell you your plan on day 7. Okay, inshallah. What I do when I study a surah is I recite that surah over and over again for at least a few days. Just recite that surah. And that's my first step. And I write down what I think are some observations or questions about that surah. I make a note of them. Either I make a mental note of them, or I keep taking notes on my phone on what I think is going on in the ayat. I then try to understand, the second step is I try to understand the organization of the surah, the organization of its ideas. You saw some of that when I showed you the last slides, right? But that kind of organization is called like a structural coherence, meaning you're kind of noticing a pattern in the text. But there are other kinds of organizational matters, meaning what are some key words that are repeating themselves in the surah? What are some themes that are connected to each other? For example, purity keeps coming up directly and indirectly, right, in the surah. So Yusabbihu had to do with purity. Then Quddus had to do with purity. Yuzakihim had to do with purity. Himar, from the Jewish perspective, had to do with purity, right? So there's lots of, what are some themes that keep recurring or showing up in different ways inside a surah that bind the ideas of the surah together? That's the second thing I look at. So this is kind of a literary type of study. The third layer of my study is to investigate the meanings of the words in the surah. So you've seen me show you some slides behind Sabbaha, or some slides behind Quddus, or some slides behind any key word in the ayah, tamanni, right? So I want to have a deeper understanding of the vocabulary of the surah and what I might learn from that in the context of this surah. So that would be my third layer of study of that surah. And then by this time I have not opened any tafsir. Like I've not listened to any scholar or this is just my process. Then my next step in the surah is to actually ask myself, what questions come in my mind when I read the surah? For example, a question that came in my mind is, that I discussed with you today, well, should I be wishing for death if I am from the awliya of Allah? That's not a question I read in tafsir. That was my own question. What's the difference between Subuh and Quddus is my own question. Why is the analogy of the mule or the donkey being used? That's my own question. So I have my own list of questions about the surah. And then I try to find the answers to those questions across the Quran. And then another wave, these are multiple waves I know, but another wave of study of the surah is, if the Quran is talking about something, I want to know more about it from outside the Quran. Like, for example, I actually must have watched 2 different videos long videos, documentaries on donkeys. And I read several articles on donkeys because Allah talked about donkeys. So if he talks about something, I want to know more about it. That's just the way my brain works towards surahs. When we were studying Surah Al-Dhariyat, with Dhariyati Dharwa, the winds that blow and carry, I studied the winds. I studied the National Geographic articles on the winds and how winds move, and the winds over the North Atlantic versus the Pacific, and different what do winds carry? How do the winds carry air, not just temperature and moisture, but also pollen and sand, and like I just want to know. And if, another surah comes up, like last surah came up and Allah mentioned monasteries, and I had to study and look at the history of the Catholic Church and where the monk life began, and because Allah mentioned they lived the monk life. So I want to know more about the monk life and where it came from and what happened, right? Dr. Sahib and I call this the worlds of the Quran. Allah refers to something and I want to enter that world. I want to go inside that world and take a deep look at what is it that Allah referred to, right? And then that opens up different insights, like the insights in, the biblical analogies that Dr. Sahib or Dr. Saqib actually pointed out for me, that I shared with you guys about the donkey and the mule and carrying and all of that stuff. So that's another process. Now towards the end, then I listen to, I read Mutawalli Sha'rabi second. Actually, I listen to Dr. Isar Ahmed, his Mufassal Darse Quran, it was called, in Urdu first. It's a detailed lecture series on the Quran. Dr. Saab is my first inspiration in the Quran. I've heard him hundreds of times before, but I listen to him again anyway. And I listen to him to see how I think differently from he does. And his lectures on this surah are 4 hours long. So he covered the entire surah in 4 hours. Urdu, yeah. That's not in English. And then I'll read Mutawalli Sha'rabi, because he has nice insights sometimes, rahmahullah, if there's something available from him or some video I can find of his. Then I'll start building my way up to go towards the tafsir, but not go there yet. Then one of the people I will read up on is Dr. Fadl Salih Hassam al-Ra'i, and I'm very grateful for the sister Arnout. I believe she's in Saudiya. She transcribed his lectures and organized them by surah. So she'll send me a Word document for each surah, so I can go through his work on the surah. That's in Arabic. And I go through that. He offers some really interesting comparative analysis. Why did Allah use this word in this ayah? Why did he use that word in that ayah? And he has some really cool comparative textual analysis on the ayat. And then I discuss every ayah with my team. There's 2 teams. One I get on a call with, and one I am on a WhatsApp group with. Just text. We text each other, voice note each other. My call team is in Islamabad in Pakistan. It's made up of 8 women and 2 men. All of them are graduates from the International Islamic University of Islamabad, or they're still continuing their education there. And they all have specialization in Quran or tafsir study. They're absolutely brilliant. They range in age. Some of them are bachelors, some of them are master's students, some of them are PhD students. And we'll just say, okay, I'll give them a call and say, hey, today we're going to discuss ayah number 1. You guys read whatever tafsirs you're going to read, but I want your thoughts on ayah number 1. We'll just do tadabbur on the ayat together for 2 hours on just ayah number 1. And then next day on ayah number 2, and next day on ayah number 3, like that, right? So that's part of my process. Whatever questions I have, discussions I want to have, I call Dr. Suhaib Saeed, who's head of research at Bayyinah right now. I talk to him, get his insights and thoughts on the ayah, then I read the tafsir. And then, because the tafsir is somebody else's work, but I want to do my homework before I read them. So it's a process. It takes time. It takes a little bit of time. But your process is not going to be like that. Your process is super easy. It's going to be like ordering pizza. Hopefully not German pizza.
I hope you guys enjoyed that video clip. My team and I have been working tirelessly to try to create as many resources for Muslims to give them first steps in understanding the Quran, all the way to the point where they can have a deep, profound understanding of the Quran. We are students of the Quran ourselves, and we want you to be students of the Quran alongside us. Join us for this journey on BayyinahTV.com, where thousands of hours of work have already been put in. And don't be intimidated, it's step by step by step, so you can make learning the Quran a part of your lifestyle. There's lots of stuff available on YouTube, but it's all over the place. If you want an organized approach to studying the Quran beginning to end for yourself, your kids, your family, and even among peers, that would be the way to go. Sign up for BayyinahTV.com.